Guys, if you are anything at all like me, you've always dreamt of having a garage full of beautiful Porsches. Of course, we have to have a GT car, a classic 911, and why not throw in a daily driver to match? And then, boom, you head down to your local Porsche dealership and realize that dream, it's gonna cost you $500,000. Well, it turns out the solution to our collective problem here might lie in one single insurance auto auctions lot here in California. That's right, we might be able to fill that garage a lot cheaper than we thought. I'm honestly super excited about all 5 of these cars, especially that guy up there. So I don't really know where to start first. I guess it's only fair that we start with the most expensive one. Now, unless you guys have been living under a rock lately, you know I just completed my own Porsche Cayman GT4 rebuild. This one, she's just a little worse. And by a little worse, I mean it's like 10 times as bad, but you get my point. There's definitely a lot to digest on this car. So I guess we're gonna start with the part I'm most familiar with, up here in the front area. Now, as luck would have it, the front area here, the frame rail sections down there, the upper tub, compared to the rest of this car, they actually don't look that bad. On the one I just fixed, that was where a majority of the damage was. Honestly, it was a pretty easy fix. We didn't even need any special tools. To give you guys the full scope of what's going on with this front end, we'd need to take all that stuff off. We obviously can't do that at the auction. It looks like, however, the majority of the damage is over here on this driver's side. This flat piece you see right here that's pushed down quite a bit, that's a giant ring that goes all the way around the top. It's actually what holds this entire front weather seal on. That piece, it's just spot welded and riveted on. It's pretty easy to pull off. I promise you guys, if I can do that, you can too. Now, obviously, everybody would go about fixing this in a different way. Mine, it was completely trashed. It was all buckled in, kinked up pretty good. This one, I suppose it's possible that you could just fix it. All the way up the fender there's little tabs that come off the main piece of the tub, and this upper ring is kind of just crimped down onto it. There was a really weird style of connection that I'm not familiar with. A really easy way to tell if there's any other damage to that upper ring there, look for kinks just like that in the weather stripping. If you pull that up, you can see that it's down. If you look right here, this side, it's up a little bit. If you feel underneath, you can feel that that metal is also up a little bit. Even with all that said, that particular panel, it's not super thick, it's pretty flat. It might not be the worst thing to bend back. That's probably about the end of the easy fix stuff on this particular GT4. Starting with the obvious, you're gonna need a front bumper, you're gonna need fenders, you're gonna need headlights if they're the PDLS, which they are. These 4 little guys here mean this is a very expensive headlight. On my rebuild, I paid like $4,500 for them, and I considered myself lucky. The front passenger suspension, the rear passenger suspension, the driver front suspension. It looks like possibly this rear driver suspension survived, but that's about it. And while coming around to the rear driver side, brought us a little good news on the suspension front. It also showed us this. This car was very clearly on its roof. The entire roof is absolutely trash. That's obviously gonna need to be replaced. This quarter, I don't know if this is just a simple skin replace. Honestly, I would bet that there's probably a little more going on in there. Even just tapping it, some of these places feel really solid, meaning it got into some inner structure. More bad news as we get around to the back. This very expensive carbon spoiler, it's not there. Don't know where it is, but it ain't here. Is it in the car? Unfortunately not. So that spoiler is presumably somewhere on the side of some California highway. One other piece of bad news. It definitely surprised me when I rebuilt this car. I don't want it to surprise any of you if you end up buying this stuff. This spoiler here, it's a little plastic duckbill. The normal Caymans have an active spoiler. This one's just a plastic panel because we have this big giant wing. Well, most of them do. When I tried to buy that from Porsche for my GT4 because it was also missing, they told me it was not available, period. No ETA, they wouldn't even give me a part number on it. One other thing I had a little bit of trouble finding, the stock muffler. It actually posed quite the challenge. Fortunately, we were able to do it. The good news on this one is it's there and intact. It might be a little hard to see, but if you look through there, it also has the stock cats, the stock over the axle pipes. In here, there are all kinds of just broken miscellaneous parts. This is part of the spoiler, and this is actually really cool. Mine was also broken. I never got to see inside of it though. Fortunately today, we all get to see what the inside of a carbon fiber GT4 spoiler looks like. You also have what looks like part of a mirror assembly, presumably, yeah, the driver's side. That's about where that's supposed to go. The only other part of note in here, although it's obliterated and the other half is missing, is this duckbill spoiler I was just talking about. That guy sits just like that. Back to the damage. Pillar on the passenger side. This thing slid for a good bit of time. Look at that, wow. We all know people have fixed much worse, but this car, by no means is it gonna be an easy fix. This quarter over here, it's pretty mashed in, but at least on this side, I don't think it got into the inner structure. So I guess take that as a small win. Now, of course, we have to see what we're working with on the inside. First and most importantly, negative on the driving front, negative on the value front, it doesn't have carbon buckets. Now to slightly redeem the car, at least it's manual. Compared to the rest of the damage on this car, this might seem like small potatoes, but you have a radiator assembly down there that is half good. The condenser there is bowed in half pretty good. You have remnants of the headlight kind of hanging everywhere. You do have part of the fog light there. I'm not sure how much of it survived. The center radiator is intact. This guy here, it might look broken, but this is actually supposed to be this way. This side piece here goes up the bumper. This front diffuser is its own little piece. They kind of clip together. It might sound weird, but it looks fine when it's on the car and attached. This mirror here, you may, and I do specify may, be able to get away with buying parts and repairing some of it. It's probably gonna be easier to find a nice used secondhand mirror. Obviously, when I got in the car, that wasn't a privacy curtain. It's gonna need curtain airbags. Factor that in. Now the driver's and passenger airbags, they didn't blow, so that's a little bit of good news. They're definitely not cheap. Funny enough, on my car, which they probably should have blown, they didn't either. That honestly makes me think that these cars are a little hesitant to blow the forward airbags. As far as side skirts here, the drivers, I'm probably gonna say you can heat that up and fix it, so you can save a little money there. Over here on the passenger side, once again, I think you can fix that. Now that rip there, that might be a little bit of a bigger deal. Still something that could be fixed with, say, a plastic welder. Now, for as horrendous as this car really looks, there is one big, and I do mean big, plus. It's listed as running on IAA.com. So let's find out if it's gonna start for us today. Now I'm a little confused. I don't know what any of that is. It's presumably for air ride suspension, but I've already looked. This thing has stock shocks. It might not show up well on camera, but you can see those red coil springs in there. There was also a Forgiato plate frame in the trunk, so that, plus that, might be how the car ended up like this. Now, if you had air ride or something like that on it, and you wrecked it this bad, I don't know why you'd take it off. Presumably most of that stuff would have been bad anyway, but what do I know, because, well, static life. Now let's see, with as messed up as she is it gonna start? Well, it has something going for it. Couple small revs, it sounds really healthy, but we're gonna leave it there. We all know there's a lot more that goes into determining if a car has a good engine, but that little test sounded pretty good. So what do you guys think on this one? It's obviously super, super rough, but it runs. Presumably if the suspension was all there, it would drive just fine. I'm not quite sure how to feel about it. It would take a lot of work, but on that same note, this one's gonna be a lot cheaper than the $51,000 that I had to pay for mine. With that mileage in a super unique and popular color like Miami blue, I have to imagine that this car was all together, even though it didn't have carbon buckets, clean title, of course, it's still probably a $120,000 car. So with that in mind, what would you guys pay for this? What do you think I should pay for it if I'm itching to do another GT4 rebuild? I could spend all day looking over this GT4, but I think I've got what I needed to know out of it. Now over here, we move on to the daily driver portion of the video. We're just gonna move right on down this line, and if you know me, you know I'm an EV fan. I know, EV's a bad word, but even if you don't like EVs, you have to admit these Taycans, whatever they're called, pretty awesome looking cars. Some of you may also know my daily driver. It's one of those things over there. The only thing stopping me from getting one of these is the fact that they're more expensive than a Plaid and they don't perform as well. Because of that, I can't see myself pulling the trigger on one, but if I could find myself one here at salvage auction, and it happened to, you know, be an awesome color, like some sort of green, and I could get into it a little cheaper than I could buy one used for, I mean, why not, right guys? This car, it looks like it's in really good shape. In fact, other than the bumper being off, this entire driver's side, it looks pretty minty. This very, very expensive car definitely didn't get sent to IAA because of just that. There's no way. There's got to be some undercarriage damage, or I did just notice that stuff there. Actually, it's split right there. Okay, so maybe this makes a little more sense. I have to say though, even with all that, this is still a really, really expensive car. I suppose it's definitely also possible that parts simply aren't available for it. Bad for insurance companies, bad for normal people who wreck their car. Great for guys like you and me. Now we've reached the good news, bad news portion of this car. Bad news, it's taped up so we can't get inside. Good news, it's not like we can start a motor anyway, so I guess does it really even matter? I'm not quite sure how these cars lock or unlock, so hopefully the passenger side is unlocked. Oh, okay, it is. You all know I'm a sucker for cool color interiors, even if they're purple. And purple, this interior definitely is. You guys are gonna have to let me know on this. Is this a fairly common interior color, or did somebody go out of their way to option a green on purple car? Sounds ridiculous, looks awesome, at least in my opinion. That is kind of interesting. I don't know why the rear seat would be out of it, and more importantly, I don't know where the rear seat is. We have presumably some under panels here, which if you take this all into account, things start to make a little more sense. I'm gonna have to guess that there's something going on more with this car as far as structurally, or if they're anything like Tesla's, this is how you access the top of the battery pack. So I suppose being that there's an under panel off the car, it's quite likely that something could have got into the battery. The counter argument to that, of course, is the fact that the wheel bolts are still there. That means this wheel didn't simply get ripped off during the wreck. So hopefully that wheel sitting back there in the trunk did its job and kept this car up off the ground and protected all the important stuff underneath of it. Now let's see what else we can see as far as damage goes. Obviously, it's going to be in everybody's best interest to just go ahead and replace this entire corner over here, as far as suspension goes at least. You have the airbag, you have the shock, you have all these control arms. The brake caliper there, that probably did survive. I think insurance was kind of just marking those scuffs there. Now the inner structure, let's take a look again. It looks like the worst of it is probably that rip right there. Now one thing I did see towards the rear of it there, that subframe, or what I presume is the subframe, is cracked. And not just cracked, shattered. We have ourselves some loose wiring there. Some more wiring down there that is not only loose, but the connectors themselves are actually broken. That silver cylinder down there, that's an air tank. That thing is sitting on the ground, so at the very least, that's gonna need attention. I'm sure you guys can see that orange braided line. In EVs, that's code for something that's a battery cable. AKA, do not touch this, it will screw you up. The quarter panel back there, which is a really small quarter if we're being honest, that has a little bit of damage, though I'd probably think that's pretty easily fixable. I don't know that you'd need to go replacing that. You have a little bit of damage there on the passenger rear door, that passenger side skirt. That's gone, don't know where that is. Other than that, guys, this car is really just beautiful. It looks awesome. I think it's gonna be a really, really easy fix for somebody. Since there's no engine to start, I guess there's not really a point to powering this thing up. So I went ahead over to IAA.com to check the mileage, 4488. Once again, just an absolutely beautiful car. And it kind of makes me want one. Those guys over there, the Macan GTS, these are a little more in my price range, especially when they look like this. Now I should note, this guy here, it's a little older than the ones I've been looking at. This one's a 2017, but once again, like that car, and pretty much everything else I've ever bought from salvage auction. If it's cheap, and I feel like I'm getting a good deal on it, I'm probably not gonna say no. I've watched quite a few Macan GTS auctions. The ones in this kind of condition tend to go for 25, 30 grand, something around that. When they get nicer, when they get newer, it can definitely go up. On the opposite side though, I've seen some of these cars that are actually pretty beat up go for like 15 grand. So if you can get yourself into one of those, I think you'd end up with a real nice daily, really cheap. Before we figure out exactly how cheap this one's gonna be, we gotta get a good look at this damage here. First thing that sticks out, obviously, and literally, the suspension. The tire, it's blown off of it. Let's see, is that other wheel turned fully to the right? It is not, so that's a problem. This hood shell assembly, I don't really know why it's not lining up too well. This side over here, it looks pretty straight. It just looks like it's popped. But then you get over here, and that hole, it's just not looking right. I am aware of how that sounded. This turn signal light is completely broken. The front bumper may be fixable, but it's still probably gonna be your best bet to replace it. I see some plastic hanging down. I see some wires hanging down. But once again, what do we expect? This is an expensive car. As you've heard 100 times on this channel, they're not totaling this for nothing. Well, I could tell you this wasn't embarrassing, but then I'd be lying to you. I'm gonna have to take a quick Google break and learn how to open this hood. Turns out I'm actually not that dumb. There's supposed to be a handle in there that you can just pull. That handle, it's broken off. Fortunately, it looks like we can see most of the damage through the bumper and from under the car. The only thing I'm worried about is if that means we're not gonna be able to start it because we can't get power to it. We'll find the answer to that before we look at the rest of the damage. There we go. That red interior, it just smacked me square in the face. From the outside, this kind of looks like a plain car. It's white, black wheels, nothing special. This kind of changes things. It's no purple, but it's pretty awesome. In addition to that, I have to imagine this is an aftermarket carbon fiber steering wheel, something I definitely did not expect to see on a Macan. Not only the color, the interior conditions, pretty phenomenal. I can't help but notice there's some lights on the dash. Maybe this thing has power. Maybe we're gonna get lucky. 79,000 miles. Oh my, it's almost there. I bet if we give it one more try. I can't get to the individual latches. Don't ask me why. This one's like, there's plastic on it or something. There we go. Take that, you dumb SUV. We did waste a little more time than I'd like to admit trying to figure that out. Let's get this thing running. The first thing I noticed, this Macan, it sounds awesome. Idle's nice, everything looks good. Let's see if we can scope out any damage from up here in the engine bay. And the answer to that question is definitely not. Quick note, that handle I was talking about, that's where it's supposed to go. I suspect we're gonna find some damage under the car there. Well, I suspected. It really doesn't look that bad. You see the under trays there hanging down. I guess retail on this car is probably like 50, something like that. The more I think about it, it really might not be out of line to think that this did get totaled for the damage that you can see. You have this hood, which I cannot imagine is anything resembling cheap. It is absolutely massive, and while this one could probably be fixed, who knows how the insurance company wrote it up. So from what I've saw on IAA.com, from what I've seen of this car in person, this looks super solid. Not only is it extremely rare to see a 993 at auction, but to see a white one and see it this clean is absolutely unreal. All right, clean up the drool. Let's get inside this motherfucker. It gets even better. Can you possibly imagine? Guys, there's very few cars that really wow me at auction. This is one of them. There is a custom license plate here, which we are definitely gonna hide because nobody needs to go looking this guy up. The only issue with this car, that right there. Definitely kind of a bummer, but I'd rather manual swap one than fix one that's completely jacked up, rusted out, whatever. You give me a nice clean body and I will do what I need to do. And speaking of clean, wow. Definitely did not expect this from a 993. This entire car, it's just amazing. It's the only way to put it. As far as the damage, very, very minor. Though on a car like this, I have no clue how energy moves. Being older, being a little more fragile, maybe things get shifted around a little more than they would on, say, a modern 911. No Macan problems here. Man, they even took his car cover. It looks like you're gonna need to factor in some replacement hood struts, but that's the least of our concerns, right? Look at even the underside of everything. Look at the jams. This car is just seriously A1 clean. And keep in mind, it's been sitting in a salvage auction for God knows how long. I'm sorry, I promise that's the last time I get distracted by this magnificent car. On to the damage. Let's see. Fender, obviously. Headlight, clearly. Bumper, yeah, we're gonna need that. I am utterly unfamiliar with what lies behind these bumpers. It looks pretty packed back there. I'd assume it probably damaged the radiators. Don't lie. I know you're on the way to the comments. Anyway, I'm just gonna get as many angles of this damage as I can, and maybe if you guys know a little more about 993s, you can chime in the comments. The hood, it's bent down pretty good there. That's definitely fixable, though who knows if you're repairing a car that's this clean, maybe you're just gonna wanna replace it altogether. The bigger deal, of course, the frame. I have to imagine this car got totaled because there's some sort of frame damage. Let's see how this driver door lines up. The answer to that question is perfectly. Back gap, perfectly fine. The windshield, that's not cracked, not damaged at all. Now this is where it gets a little weird. This fender here, that's a massive gap. That's super tight, that's big. This rear gap, it's consistent, but the door shutting is just a little tight. Now that 110% could be old mechanisms. I genuinely have no clue. This was pretty nice and easy because there's no damage back there. Almost every bit of damage on this car is in that corner right there. That's always a huge bonus because if you're going to buy this thing, you only have to put your attention in one place. 83,000 miles, a working dash buzzer as well, as I'm sure you're aware of. Let's send her away. God, I love these cars. I genuinely love these cars. I already have quite a few Porsche projects, but maybe this is the one. Just maybe. We have great oil pressure. I'm assuming that buzzer is either because one, the hatch is popped, or two, there's blown airbags. Other than that, I don't see any lights. For an air-cooled Porsche, this didn't give us any trouble whatsoever. It cranks right up. It sounds awesome, it sounds healthy. Well, not healthy, but it sounds like a healthy air-cooled Porsche. I'm truly hard-pressed to think of anything else we could possibly want out of this car other than being manual, and well, I guess not wrecked, but we wouldn't be seeing it otherwise. Perfect working spoiler there, and if you weren't a fan of the way this car looked before, you have to be now. I'm sorry, you just have to be. But with that, I guess we've seen what we need to see on this. The only question I have is what's it gonna go for? Currently, I genuinely have no idea, so I'm gonna have to do a little research later. Last up on the list here is kind of a dark horse, a car that I don't pay much attention to, a 1992 964 Targa. For everything that I loved about that 993, this one traditionally kind of just doesn't do it for me. The good news is, however, these ones, I believe they're a good bit cheaper than the 993s down there. If you thought there was going to be more good news on this, you're not going to get it. The damage, it's not horrendous. It's honestly not that bad. It basically needs all the same stuff that 993 does. Only difference being this one has some damage back here on the rear end as well. Of course, everything's taped up here, so we're not gonna go ripping that off. Okay, so maybe there is a little more good news. From what I can see through there, the engine, it doesn't look horrendously dirty. But otherwise, back here, we have some problems. You're gonna need a quarter panel. We all know old cars tend to bend, twist, kink a little more than the newer stuff does. One thing that's not that big of a deal, the Targa top, you're gonna need that reupholstered. Compared to the other issues this car has though, I mean, what are we talking about? You can see where that fender got hit. It's kind of bashed in here. I really don't know the structure of these cars. Honestly, it doesn't look horrific, but I'm sure there's a little more going on here. As for like a frame rail down there, I can't see anything. I definitely can't see any insurance markings, but we do have some separated metal there on the front corner of this front tub. Personally, without digging into it, I can't imagine that that's too bad to fix. You can see the start of the frame rail there, and all that damage is above that. Obviously, bumper, headlight, fender, anything that goes in that corner. Judging by the fact that it has the factory Porsche spare on there, it's gonna need some type of wheel. You're probably gonna need some suspension. The door gap, that's all jacked up. I guess it could be worse because the rear door gap, it's wide, but it's consistent. Now here's where things get disappointing on this car. It's taped up. That means we can't get in it to start it. We can't even pop the engine cover, hood, whatever you want to call it. The passenger side, also taped up. So we really can't do a whole lot more with this. One thing we can do, however, is hop on over to IAA.com. Very fortunately for us, they have a run video. Not only that, but we just learned this car has 250,000 miles on it. 250,000. So fortunately, even though we can't get in this car, we can't start it, if you're interested in this one in particular, head on over to iaa.com, check out everything you need to see there. And though the last one may have been a little disappointing, this lineup of cars, I gotta say, one of the strongest in any salvage auctions I've ever seen. And now comes the fun part. I need you guys to go down in the comments. Let me know which one of these cars, if you could only buy one, which one are you buying? Are you taking the easy way out? Are you going with the front runner, Dallas Cowboys, Alabama, New York Yankees? Are you taking the GT4? Are you taking the controversial road less traveled and going with the Taycan? I still don't know how to say it. You have 3 kids, you definitely need something to haul them around in? You going with the Macan? Or, like me, are you going with the 993? Screw the kids, screw the family, I'm taking out the passenger seat. I just want to drive the thing. This lot here, at least as far as Porsches go, how do we top it? I personally can't recall another time that I've ever came to a lot to look at only 5 cars and wanted to buy 4 of them. But with that, we have more cars to look at, more to build, more to drive, and more to buy. So I'll see you soon.